The Galactic Survival Academy had seen many species attempt the infamous Keth-9 desert trial. Vortakians with their triple hearts, Zalarians with their photosynthetic skin, even the mighty Grex warriors with their titanium bones. All of them had failed. All of them had either died or been rescued half-dead from the merciless sands of planet Aridus Prime. So when Captain Vex Morlack, a six-armed Quantari officer with scars mapping his purple exoskeleton, announced that a human was next on the roster, the entire viewing chamber erupted in what could only be described as alien laughter, which, for the record, sounded like someone trying to start a broken hover engine while gargling swamp water. "A human!" wheezed Commander Thrix, her four eyes bulging from their stalks. "Those soft pink creatures that leak water from their eyes when they're sad? The ones who die if they don't consume liquid every few rotations?" Vex nodded grimly, his mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement. Apparently, this one volunteered. Name's Jake Martinez, 26 standard years old, former planetary surveyor from Earth Colony 7. The viewing chamber fell silent except for the occasional nervous chirp from the Flutterians in the back row. Everyone knew the statistics. The Keth-9 desert trial was a week-long survival test in one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. Temperatures that could melt copper during the day, then drop to levels that would freeze nitrogen at night. Sandstorms that could strip flesh from bone in minutes. Predatory crystal worms that hunted by vibration. And to make things truly delightful, the entire region was saturated with electromagnetic interference that rendered most technology useless. "Has he been informed about the mortality rate?" asked Dr. Yelan Krieg, the Academy's chief medical officer, her tentacles nervously braiding themselves. 97.4% fatality rate over the past century, Vex recited mechanically. He said, and I quote, "Sounds like my kind of vacation." Several species made sounds that roughly translated to, "Oh, great ancestors preserve us all." Through the reinforced viewing panels, they could see the human in the preparation chamber. Jake Martinez was unremarkable by most galactic standards. Average height for his species, brown hair that looked perpetually messy, and wearing the standard-issue survival gear that looked comically oversized on his frame. He was currently examining a multi-tool with the kind of casual interest most beings reserved for checking their reflection. "Look at him," muttered Sub-Commander Nexus, a crystalline being whose voice rang like broken glass. "He's not even preparing properly. No meditation, no ritual combat with training partners, no ceremonial purging of the digestive system." Jake had indeed spent his preparation time doing what appeared to be absolutely nothing productive. He'd eaten a meal that consisted primarily of something called beef jerky and energy bars, then proceeded to take what humans inexplicably called a power nap right there on the prep room floor, using his backpack as a pillow. The Academy staff watched in fascination and horror as Jake was transported to the drop zone. The transport pilot, a gruff Coranian named Blex, had seen hundreds of candidates over the years. He'd learned not to get attached. "Listen, human," Blex said through the comm system as they approached the drop coordinates. "I've flown everyone from Titan-class warriors to psychic empaths out here. Most of them at least look nervous. You sure you understand what you're getting into?" Jake's voice came back relaxed, almost cheerful. "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fun. How bad could it be?" Blex's four hearts collectively skipped a beat. In his experience, beings who said things like, "How bad could it be?" usually ended up as very expensive-to-recover corpses. The transport hovered over the drop zone, a flat expanse of red sand surrounded by jagged rock formations that looked like the galaxy's most hostile sculpture garden. In the distance, The shimmer of heat waves made the horizon dance like liquid mercury. "Drop in 10 seconds, Blex announced. "Your emergency beacon will only work if you're dying. Understand? The interference out there will block everything else." "Got it," Jake replied, shouldering his pack. "See you in a week." And with that casual farewell, he jumped. Blex watched through his rear viewer as the human deployed his parachute with textbook precision, landed with a neat roll, and immediately started walking toward what looked like certain death. The pilot shook his head, all 4 of his ears drooping sadly. Another one for the memorial wall. Back at the academy, the monitoring staff had activated every long-range sensor they could manage. Through the crackling interference, they could barely make out Jake's heat signature as he moved across the desert floor. Thermal readings show surface temperature at 47 degrees Celsius and rising, reported tech specialist Quim, her multifaceted eyes reflecting data streams from a dozen screens. He'll be experiencing severe heat stress within the hour. But Jake seemed oddly untroubled by this prospect. Through their fuzzy thermal imaging, they could see him maintaining a steady pace, stopping occasionally to examine rocks or plants. At one point, he actually appeared to be talking to himself? "Is he having a mental breakdown already?" asked Commander Thrix. "Negative," replied Dr. Krieg, checking her psychological monitoring equipment. "Human bio-readings indicate he's laughing?" This was unprecedented. Most species spent their first few hours in the Keth 9 desert alternating between panic and desperate attempts to find shelter. Jake Martinez was apparently finding something amusing about his situation. The real test came when the first sandstorm hit. Keth 9 sandstorms weren't like the gentle dust devils of more civilized worlds. These were planet-scarring hurricanes of crystalline particles that could scour metal and had been known to change the topology of entire regions. The approaching storm showed up on their weather sensors like an approaching wall of death, over 3 kilometers high and moving at speeds that would shame most atmospheric fighters. "He has to see it coming," whispered Sub-Commander Nexus. "Even humans aren't that blind." Through the static-filled feed, they could indeed see Jake had stopped walking. He was standing in the open desert, hands on his hips, looking at the approaching storm wall with what appeared to be professional interest rather than the appropriate terror. "He's going to die," announced Captain Vex flatly. "No shelter, no protective barriers, nothing. That storm will strip him to bones in minutes." But Jake Martinez, apparently, had other plans. They watched in stunned silence as the human began jogging toward a cluster of massive desert cacti about half a kilometer away. These weren't the cute, decorative plants some species kept as pets. These were Aridus titans, some of the largest plant life forms in the galaxy, with trunks thick enough to house small shuttlecraft and covered in spines that could puncture military-grade armor. "What is he doing?" gasped Dr. Krieg. Jake had reached the largest cactus in the cluster, pulled out his multi-tool, and begun cutting into it, while a literal wall of death approached behind him. "He's lost his mind," declared Commander Thrix. "The heat has driven him insane." Through the interference, they could barely make out Jake's actions, but he appeared to be carving some sort of opening in the massive plant. Bright green fluid was spurting out, which would have been toxic to most galactic species, but the human seemed unconcerned about getting it on his hands and clothes. The storm hit just as Jake disappeared inside his improvised shelter. For the next 6 hours, the monitoring station received nothing but static and the howling electromagnetic signature of the storm. When the interference finally cleared, they expected to find nothing but scattered bones and shredded equipment. Instead, their sensors picked up a single steady human life sign, coming from inside the cactus. "He's alive," announced Quim, her voice filled with disbelief. "Impossible," muttered Captain Vex. "Run a diagnostic on the sensors." "Sensors are functioning normally, sir. The human is definitely alive, and his bio-readings suggest he's sleeping?" This caused another round of the alien equivalent of stunned silence. "Sleeping," repeated Commander Thrix slowly. "During a Class 9 sandstorm, inside a plant." Over the next day, they watched in mounting astonishment as Jake's plan became clear. The human had somehow hollowed out a survival shelter inside the massive cactus, complete with what appeared to be a water collection system using the plant's natural moisture. When he emerged the following morning, he looked refreshed, hydrated, and was still talking to himself with apparent good humor. "Day 2, personal log," they heard him say through the crackling comm interference. "Cactus Hotel gets 4 stars. Room service is terrible, but the climate control is surprisingly good. The morning view could use some work, though." Dr. Krieg tentacularly rubbed her temples. "He's treating this like a vacation." The second day brought new challenges that should have finished off any survivor. The crystal worms emerged. These predatory nightmares were exactly what they sounded like. 3-meter-long creatures that looked like someone had given malicious intelligence to a strand of living diamonds. They hunted by detecting vibrations through the sand and could bite through most known metals with ease. The monitoring station watched tensely as seismic sensors detected at least 6 of the creatures converging on Jake's position. Standard protocol for crystal worm encounters was to remain absolutely motionless and hope they lost interest. Most species could manage this for maybe an hour before their nerves broke. Jake Martinez apparently decided to go for a morning jog. "What is he doing?" shrieked Sub-Commander Nexus, his crystalline form resonating with stress harmonics. Through their long-range sensors, they could see Jake had emerged from his cactus shelter and begun what could only be described as an exercise routine. Push-ups, jumping jacks, and what appeared to be some sort of interpretive dance, all of which sent vibrations through the sand that should have been like ringing a dinner bell for every predator within kilometers. The crystal worms burst from the sand like living missiles, their diamond-edged maws gaping wide enough to swallow a small shuttle. And Jake Martinez sidestepped them like he was avoiding puddles on a sidewalk. "Impossible," breathed Captain Vex. But there it was, happening right in front of their sensors. The human was somehow predicting exactly where each worm would emerge, dancing between their attacks with casual precision that suggested he was enjoying himself. When the frustrated predators finally gave up and burrowed back into the sand, Jake actually waved goodbye. "Friendly neighborhood earthworms," they heard him comment cheerfully. "Bit bigger than the ones back home, though." By the third day, the Academy monitoring staff had given up trying to apply conventional survival logic to Jake Martinez's actions. When the temperature dropped to -30 degrees Celsius that night, Jake had calmly gathered some dried cactus matter, produced fire from nothing but friction and patience, and spent the evening roasting what appeared to be some sort of desert tuber he'd dug up during the day. "Where did he even find food out there?" demanded Commander Thrix. "Unknown," replied Quim, her compound eyes reflecting confusion. "Our botanical surveys indicated no edible plant life in that sector." "Maybe it's not edible," suggested Dr. Krieg nervously. "Maybe he's poisoning himself slowly." But Jake's bio-readings remained stubbornly healthy, and his cheerful commentary continued to crackle through the interference. "Day 3 dinner review," his voice carried across the comm channels. "Desert potato surprise gets 2 thumbs up. Needs salt, but you can't have everything. Tomorrow I'm thinking of trying those blue berries I spotted near the rock formations. They're either nutritious or spectacularly toxic. Either way, it'll be interesting. The monitoring team was beginning to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic survival history. Not just survival, but what appeared to be tourism. On the fourth day, Jake encountered the Faze spiders. Faze spiders were native to Aridus Prime and represented one of the most feared predatory species in the galaxy. They could shift partially out of normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to track or fight. Their venom could paralyze creatures 10 times Jake's size, and their webs were strong enough to trap military vehicles. The Academy staff watched in horror as sensor readings indicated at least a dozen of the creatures moving toward Jake's position. Even Grek's warriors, with all their legendary toughness, had never survived a Faze spider encounter. Jake was sitting by his morning fire, apparently cooking breakfast, when the first spider materialized directly behind him. What happened next would be debated in xenobiology circles for decades afterward. Without even turning around, Jake casually reached back with a long stick from his fire, poked the spider directly in what appeared to be a sensitive spot, and sent it scuttling backward with what could only be described as an indignant shriek. "Not before breakfast, guys," Jake said calmly, not even looking up from whatever he was cooking. "I'm not fully human until I've had my coffee substitute." The Faze spiders, apparently baffled by this response, spent the next hour materializing at various positions around Jake's camp, only to be casually discouraged with precise pokes from his stick. It was like watching the galaxy's most deadly predators being scolded by a patient parent. Eventually, the spiders gave up and phased away to find less confusing prey. He domesticated them," whispered Sub-Commander Nexus. "Domesticated?" Captain Vex's mandibles were clicking rapidly with stress. "He treated them like household pests." But that was only the beginning of Day 4's impossibilities. The sandstorm that hit that afternoon was even worse than the first one. A howling wall of destruction that registered as a Category 10 event on their weather instruments. These storms had been known to level small cities. Jake took one look at the approaching tempest, finished his lunch, and went back inside his cactus. Personal log. Day 4. Afternoon. His voice crackled through the storm. Interference. Second sandstorm of the week. Starting to think this place has some weather control issues. Might want to file a complaint with planetary management when I get back. On the plus side, the acoustics in here are pretty good. Thinking of trying some karaoke later. And that's exactly what he did. For 6 hours, while a storm capable of reshaping continents raged outside, Jake Martinez serenaded the Keth 9 desert with what he claimed were classic Earth hits. The monitoring station was treated to crackling renditions of songs with titles like Survival and Desert Rose, performed with enthusiasm that more than made up for accuracy. "He's singing," announced Dr. Krieg, in the tone usually reserved for reporting catastrophic system failures. "We can hear that," replied Captain Vex wearily. "No, I mean, he's actually singing. During a Category 10 storm. His stress levels are lower than they were during the prep briefing." By the end of Day 4, the Academy staff had stopped trying to predict or explain Jake Martinez's behavior. They were simply documenting what was rapidly becoming the most extraordinary survival demonstration in galactic history. The human had not just survived impossible conditions, he'd turned them into what appeared to be an outdoor adventure vacation. He'd befriended predators, weathered storms that could level cities, and done it all while maintaining a running commentary that suggested he was having the time of his life. And they still had 3 days to go. "Tomorrow's forecast shows potential meteor showers," reported Quim, reading from the weather analysis. Captain Vex's 6 arms slumped in resignation. Let me guess. He'll probably try to catch them. Through the crackling comm system, Jake's voice came through one more time that evening. Day 4 wrap-up. Weather's been interesting. Locals are friendly but shy, and the accommodations are rustic but functional. Looking forward to seeing what tomorrow brings. This is Jake Martinez, reporting live from scenic Keth 9 Desert. If you can survive here, you can survive anywhere. Good night, Galaxy. The monitoring station fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the occasional nervous flutter from the Flutterians. Jake Martinez wasn't just surviving the impossible. He was enjoying it. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. Day 5 arrived with what the weather monitoring systems politely classified as anomalous atmospheric phenomena. In practical terms, this meant the sky was raining acid, while simultaneously being struck by lightning storms that could power a small space station. The Academy monitoring team had given up sleeping. Captain Vex looked like he hadn't regenerated his exoskeleton in weeks. Commander Thrix's eye stalks were twitching uncontrollably, and Dr. Krieg had started muttering in 3 different languages, none of them complimentary. Atmospheric acid concentration at 12%, reported Tech. Specialist Quim, her voice hollow with exhaustion. Lightning strikes averaging 1 every 4 seconds. Surface electromagnetic interference is off our measurement scales. Through the crackling static of their long-range sensors, they could barely make out Jake's thermal signature. He appeared to be moving around outside his cactus shelter. "Is he insane?" whispered Sub-Commander Nexus. "The acid rain will dissolve his skin in minutes." But Jake Martinez had apparently decided that Day 5 was perfect for what he called extreme weather photography. They watched in mounting horror as he emerged from his plant-based fortress carrying what looked like a makeshift umbrella constructed from cactus leaves and some sort of reflective material from his survival kit. "Personal log. Day 5. His cheerful voice crackled through the interference. "Weather's gotten a bit spicy today. Acid rain with a chance of getting fried by lightning. Perfect opportunity to test my new portable shelter design. Patent pending, of course." The umbrella shouldn't have worked. By all known laws of chemistry and physics, the acid rain should have eaten through his improvised protection in seconds. The lightning should have turned him into a crispy human-shaped shadow on the sand. Instead, Jake was apparently taking a nature walk. "The electromagnetic readings are impossible," announced Quim, frantically recalibrating her instruments. "It's like the lightning is actively avoiding him." "Run another diagnostic," ordered Captain Vex wearily. "I've run 17 diagnostics. The equipment is functioning perfectly. The human is somehow creating a localized electromagnetic null field just by being there." Dr. Krieg looked up from her psychological monitoring equipment, all her tentacles quivering with disbelief. "His stress hormone levels are actually decreasing. He's finding this relaxing." Through the static, they could hear Jake humming what sounded like a tune while collecting samples of the acid-resistant plants that grew in the most hostile parts of the desert. Occasionally, he'd pause to make observations that suggested he was treating the entire experience like a scientific field trip. Fascinating adaptation in the local flora. His voice came through the comm system. "These purple succulents seem to actually thrive in acidic conditions. Wonder if they'd grow in my garden back home. Probably need to check the import regulations first." The acid storm lasted for 8 hours. When it finally passed, leaving the desert landscape scarred and smoking, Jake emerged from his mobile shelter completely unharmed and apparently energized by the experience. "That was invigorating," he announced to nobody in particular. Nothing like a good acid shower to clear the sinuses. Tomorrow I'm hoping for something with more variety. Maybe some hail. The monitoring team collectively decided they needed stronger medications. Day 6 brought the meteor shower. Aridus Prime's orbit occasionally intersected with debris fields from ancient stellar collisions, creating what locals cheerfully called sky falling season. The incoming meteors weren't the harmless light shows that most civilized planets experienced. These were chunks of super-dense matter traveling at relativistic speeds, each one capable of creating craters measured in kilometers. Standard protocol was to take shelter in the deepest underground bunkers available and pray to whatever deities your species favored. The meteor impacts would turn the surface into a temporary hellscape of molten rock and shock waves that could pulverize bone. Jake Martinez set up lawn chairs. Well, they weren't exactly lawn chairs. He'd constructed what appeared to be a comfortable seating arrangement using bent cactus ribs and his emergency blanket, positioned it on top of a small hill that gave him an excellent view of the sky, and was apparently settling in for the show. "He's going to watch," said Commander Thrix, in the tone usually reserved for announcing the heat death of the universe. "Maybe he doesn't understand the danger," suggested Dr. Krieg Hoopvol. This hope was dashed when Jake's voice came through the comm system, clear and enthusiastic. Personal log, Day 6. Tonight's entertainment is a meteor shower that's supposed to be visible to the naked eye. Understatement of the century. These things are going to be visible from orbit. Got my front row seat set up, some snacks prepared, and a betting pool going with myself on which crater will be the biggest. The first meteors began hitting the horizon at sunset. Each impact lit up the desert like a miniature sun, followed by shock waves that registered on seismic equipment across 3 star systems. The monitoring station's reinforced bunker, located over 200 kilometers away, rattled with each strike. Jake was sitting in his improvised chair, apparently keeping score. "Ooh, that one was at least a 7 out of 10. His voice crackled through the chaos. "Nice fireball, excellent crater formation, solid shockwave propagation. Definitely going in the highlight reel." A meteor the size of a small building struck less than 5 kilometers from his position, creating a flash that temporarily overloaded their sensors and a shock wave that should have liquefied every organ in his body. When the interference cleared, they could see Jake applauding. "Now that," he announced appreciatively, "was a proper meteor. You don't see craftsmanship like that every day. 10 out of 10 would recommend to friends." The meteor shower continued for 6 hours. 6 hours of world-ending impacts that turned the landscape into a molten hellscape, while Jake Martinez provided running commentary like he was reviewing a particularly good fireworks display. "The variety tonight has been excellent," he reported as the last few meteors streaked across the sky. "Good mix of sizes, nice distribution pattern, and the light show was absolutely spectacular. Really puts those New Year's Eve celebrations back home in perspective." By morning, the desert around Jake's position looked like the surface of a war-torn moon. Crater upon crater stretched to the horizon, with glass formations where the sand had been superheated into twisted sculptures. The air shimmered with residual heat that would have killed most oxygen-breathing species instantly. Jake had apparently slept through it all, using the residual warmth from the impacts to have what he called the best night's sleep of the whole trip. Day 7, final day. His voice came through the morning comm check. "Have to say, this has been one of the best vacations I've had in years. Great weather, interesting wildlife, spectacular nighttime entertainment, and the solitude has been exactly what I needed. Definitely coming back here someday." The monitoring team had stopped trying to understand. They simply watched in numb amazement as Jake began what appeared to be a casual hike toward the extraction point, stopping occasionally to collect souvenirs from the various craters. "Final approach to pickup coordinates," he reported cheerfully, bringing back some samples for the geology department. "Also got some great photos of the local flora and fauna. The Faze spiders are surprisingly photogenic once you get to know them." Transport pilot Blex received the extraction call with the weary resignation of someone who'd seen too much impossible nonsense in 1 week. He'd been monitoring the comm chatter and watching the sensor readings with growing disbelief. By all rights, he should be recovering a corpse, if there was even enough left to recover. Instead, Jake Martinez was waiting at the pickup coordinates, looking refreshed and relaxed, with what appeared to be a collection of geological samples and a suntan. "Pickup complete," Blex reported to the Academy, his voice reflecting the existential confusion of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally challenged. "The human is fine. Better than fine. He looks like he just got back from a spa retreat." The return flight to the Academy was filled with Jake's enthusiastic descriptions of his week in hell, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone describing a particularly good restaurant. "The accommodations were rustic but charming," he told Blex conversationally. "Room service was non-existent, but you really can't beat that authentic wilderness experience. And the weather. Wow. You just don't get variety like that on most civilized worlds." Blex, who had been flying rescue missions in the Keth-9 desert for over 2 decades, simply nodded and tried not to think too hard about what he was hearing. Back at the Academy, the monitoring team had gathered to witness Jake's return with the mixed emotions of scientists whose fundamental understanding of biology, physics, and common sense had been thoroughly demolished. When Jake walked into the debriefing room, looking healthy, happy, and carrying a bag of what he called vacation souvenirs, the assembled alien dignitaries greeted him with the kind of stunned silence usually reserved for witnessing impossible events. "So," Jake said cheerfully, settling into his chair with obvious satisfaction, "when's the next test? I hear you've got some underwater survival challenges that might be interesting. Or maybe something in a nice volcanic environment? I've always wanted to try extreme temperature camping." Captain Vex's 6 arms began twitching involuntarily. Commander Thrix made a sound like air escaping from a punctured atmospheric processor. Dr. Krieg's tentacles had braided themselves into what appeared to be a stress relief pattern that would require professional therapy to untangle. "Mr. Martinez," Captain Vex finally managed, his voice carefully controlled, "you have just completed a survival test that has a 97.4% fatality rate. You are the first being in over a century to not only survive, but to—" He paused, searching for appropriate words. "Enjoy the experience." Jake shrugged modestly. "It was a good week. Challenging, sure, but that's what made it fun. Back on Earth, we've got a saying. Any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. Same principle applies to survival situations. Plus, I got some great material for my travel blog." "Travel blog?" whispered Sub-Commander Nexus. "Oh yeah, I document all my trips to unusual places. This one's definitely going in the extreme destinations category. 5 stars, would absolutely recommend to anyone looking for a real adventure. Just make sure you pack plenty of water, and don't forget the sunscreen." The debriefing continued for 3 hours, during which Jake provided detailed explanations of his survival techniques with the casual expertise of someone discussing their favorite hobby. He'd used principles of desert survival that existed in Earth's historical records, applied them with modifications based on local conditions, and somehow made it all look effortless. "The key," he explained, sketching diagrams on the provided tablet, "is adapting to the environment instead of fighting it. The cactus provided shelter, insulation, and water. The local wildlife just needed to understand that I wasn't a threat. And the weather patterns, once you learn to read them, are actually pretty predictable. Dr. Krieg made careful notes, occasionally asking questions that revealed the vast gulf between human survival instincts and those of most galactic species. Where other beings saw impossible challenges, Jake saw interesting problems with creative solutions. "What about the psychological stress?" she asked. "The isolation, the constant threat of death, the knowledge that rescue was impossible." Jake considered this seriously. "Well, I wouldn't say it was stressful, exactly. More like focused. When you're dealing with immediate survival needs, you don't really have time to worry about abstract problems. And the isolation was actually pretty nice. It's hard to find places this quiet back in civilized space." The final question came from Captain Vex, who had been unusually quiet during the later stages of the debriefing. "Mr. Martinez," he said carefully, "what would you say to other humans who might be considering similar challenges?" Jake's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Oh, definitely go for it. There's nothing like a good survival challenge to put things in perspective. Just make sure you do your research first, pack appropriately, and remember that most problems have solutions if you're willing to think creatively. Also, bring a good book. The evenings can be a bit slow if you don't have anything to read." The Academy staff exchanged glances that communicated volumes about their collective mental state. After Jake left to file his official reports and collect his certification credentials, the monitoring team sat in their conference room, surrounded by a week's worth of sensor data that documented the impossible. "We're going to have to rewrite the entire survival training curriculum," announced Captain Vex eventually. "The xenobiology textbooks, too," added Dr. Krieg. "And the physics manuals," contributed Quim. "Basically everything," concluded Commander Thrix. Sub-Commander Nexus, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "You realize what this means, don't you?" The others looked at him expectantly. "If one human can do this," he said slowly, "what happens when we tell the rest of them that we've been calling it impossible?" The conference room fell silent as this implication sank in. In the distance, they could hear Jake Martinez chatting with the administrative staff, apparently trying to sign up for additional survival challenges. Captain Vex's mandibles clicked once, twice, then began a rapid staccato that roughly translated to, "Oh, ancestors preserve us all." Because somewhere in the back of his military-trained mind, he was beginning to suspect that Jake Martinez wasn't an exception among his species. He was probably just getting started. And that thought, Captain Vex realized, was far more terrifying than any desert, storm, or predator the galaxy could produce. After all, if humans could turn the most deadly survival test in known space into a vacation review, what would they do when they really got serious about exploring the universe? The Galactic Survival Academy was about to find out.